Hello, everyone. We are so excited today. We have with us Bill Gates and Rotary International President Barry Rassin. You do not want to miss this episode.
Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
Please support the sponsors who made this episode possible, including Johnson & Johnson's Caring Crowd and GoodCrowd.School. Bill, why polio?
Well, polio is a terrible disease, and as our foundation was getting involved in global health, we saw that Rotary, CDC, UNICEF, WHO had partnered together back in 1988. And getting rid of a disease is kind of the ultimate goal for all these infectious diseases. It's only happened once before with smallpox. They were making a lot of great progress. So we joined the partnership, and we worked together on a lot of tough countries. India looked like it'd be tough, Nigeria. Now, we're down to 2 countries. So the possibility that no kids will ever be paralyzed again, even without having to spend lots and lots of money, that appears within sight.
Is there a personal reason for you, or is it just the global picture that motivates you?
Well, the idea that a world with our resources couldn't focus on preventing these individual tragedies, it just seems crazy. There was a lot of energy back in the 50s when the vaccine was created. The March of Dimes was all about polio. They funded the creation of the very first vaccine. And, it's easy to forget this because it is in these fairly poor, difficult countries now. But that's not really just. We shouldn't have children anywhere who get this. I was in India and met the girl who sadly was the last child paralyzed by polio. And it's even worse to be paralyzed in a developing country than it is in, say, the United States.
President Barry, you have had the opportunity now to be partnered with the Gates Foundation for a long time, a number of years at Rotary. What are the key lessons you've learned from the Gates Foundation as you've been partnered in this effort to eradicate polio?
I think the beauty of it is that we recognize that when we do things together, we can do so much more. The GPEI partnership that we had worked so well because we were working together. To have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation come along and join us gave us that much more power, not only the funding, but the technical expertise that they brought to the table. And those are the kind of partnerships that Rotary wants to do more of so that we can accomplish more. I mean, polio is just one problem in the world. There's a whole lot of other ones that we're addressing on a smaller level, but we want to be able to deal with every single one of them.
So if Bill calls you up in 3 weeks after the Rotary Convention in Hamburg and says, we need Rotary to partner with us on X, are you in?
We're in. I'll tell you right now. And
make a note of that.
It might be malaria he comes to us with, because we already do a lot for malaria. We do a lot for water. We have our 6 areas of focus that we do work around the world in. But no, this is a wonderful partnership. And we were talking earlier, and I was saying we need to continue the 5-group partnership for the long term. Polio may be gone at some point. We know it's going to be gone at some point, and we need that infrastructure to stay in place so that we can work on other things in the future. This, to me, is a long-term partnership that is going to make our world a better place.
You once said, Bill, that polio was your foundation's top priority. When it's done, when that work is over, and we hope it will be soon, what becomes the top priority for you?
Yeah, we work in a lot of areas. Polio's our biggest area of spending. HIV is our 2nd biggest, and then malaria would be our 3rd biggest. Broadly, getting vaccines out to children requires these primary healthcare systems to be a lot better. So we're going into a country and saying, okay, say the north of Nigeria has an imperfect primary healthcare system. if we fix that, it helps with a lot of diseases. That kind of delivery challenge is a big thing for us. But I think HIV numerically, which of course is still a gigantic problem, will be our biggest after that, with malaria very, very close second.
Bill, you, I think personally, took an interest in developing a new polio vaccine 7 or 8 years ago, when a lot of people thought polio will be eradicated before we can finish the development and the testing of a new vaccine. In fact, as time has worn on, that work has proven to be maybe more relevant than others were saying. To what do you attribute the foresight to have seen the value of working on that years ago?
Well, there's a challenge, which is who's supposed to develop new tools for health problems that don't exist in rich or middle-income countries, health problems that only exist in poor countries. The first 2 polio vaccines were created because polio was in the United States, it was in Europe, and both of those vaccines in slightly different roles have been very key to the polio eradication campaign. The idea that we could create one that was better, particularly in terms of never reverting to cause disease, I saw that we might need it, and our foundation has a lot of expertise at funding new tool creation. So of the partners in the polio effort, it's got an acronym, GPEI, it really was obvious that we were the ones who should push that forward. Now it's an insurance policy. It may not be necessary. Right now it looks like it might be necessary, but we're so committed to the polio effort that thinking ahead, okay, let's be ready in case things evolve a different way. That's important to all the partners, and so that this one is an investment I'm very glad we did. Getting new tools often takes almost a decade, and this one, because they'll give us priority getting it through, it will be about 8.5 years from when we started to when it'll be available.
Yeah, it is a great example of foresight. I appreciate you sharing some of the background with us on that. You mentioned the GPEI, and it is a pretty unusual, maybe unique example of collaboration in the world. The closest parallel I've identified is the Council of the Parties on Climate Change. This is a little smaller than that group, but it's a similar organization in structure, it seems. It seems to be very successful. I mean, in the span of history, you mentioned smallpox is the only other disease that's ever been eradicated. We're on the cusp of eradication with polio. Why do you think this partnership with Rotary and UNICEF and the others, WHO, CDC, governments around the world, the whole litany, right?
Yeah, good job.
How has it been so successful?
Well, there's always a question when you're tackling a disease, whether you go and create a whole new organization. And in the case of polio, we decided not to do that. That decision actually was made before we joined up in the year 2000. And so the overhead has actually been kept fairly low, but because there's regular meetings and there's been good leadership, Rotary is out, they're visible, they've got people who can volunteer. If governments forget the polio thing's a priority, they can help keep it visible on the agenda. We've got mathematical modeling and product creation skills. And so I think it is a good model. In the case of HIV, a thing called the Global Fund was created, which raises quite a bit of money. It does 3 diseases, HIV, malaria, and TB. And they try to keep that pretty lean. The only other really new organization that was created in health is the one that buys the vaccines. The Global Alliance for Vaccines is called Gavi. And that's also reasonably small secretariat that happens to also be in Geneva, where WHO headquarters is. So, global health has to get by on very little money. It's not like rich world healthcare. The difference between the polio vaccine being 11 cents versus 10 cents, that's a big deal because we're buying a lot of doses, literally billions over time, and we've got a budget. It's in some ways you can say it's a large or small number. It's about $1 billion a year that we'll spend for this 5-year plan that takes us from this year to 2023, where we hope to start the post-polio period.
Yeah. President Barry is kind of an exception to the rule that Rotary really isn't a health organization, right? So partnering with UNICEF, CDC, WHO, that makes good sense. That Rotary was already a part of the GPEI when you joined. Okay, so they're part of that alliance. But you have worked very closely with Rotary. You're here today as an example of that. Incredible partnership. Why have you worked so closely with Rotary, of all people, when President Barry here is, like I say, kind of the exception to the rule? He has a healthcare background, but that's not Rotary as an institution.
Well, Rotary plays a lot of different roles. The volunteers are a huge part of the success we've had. There's a bit of fundraising where chapters will set a goal and raise money. And so when it comes time to look at, okay, are we raising enough money, the two partners who talk the most are Rotary and the Gates Foundation. We both talk to governments, we both talk to philanthropists. We've done a lot of matching programs where we'll go to Rotary and say, okay, we have this pretty large size 2-for-1 match, so that every dollar that Rotary is able to raise, there's $2 additional coming in to go towards that budget. And so constantly saying, okay, how do we keep this in mind? That brilliant Rotary ad that, we're this close. I'm always pleased when I see that out there. And
I'm trying to get them to shrink the distance.
Yeah, it's tricky because the last cases are just the hardest. And we've got the two countries now. So, we're constantly talking, and I've gone to the national conventions. I'm here at a regional event, which will be a great thing. So any way I can help Rotary with their part, that's what partners are about.
President Barry, the Gates Foundation has brought a lot of money to this effort in direct partnership with Rotary. In addition to money they've given to UNICEF and WHO directly, they've given a lot of money through Rotary. What else have they brought to the table that you value?
They brought some technical expertise. They have the contacts in the world. They can speak to governments just like we can. They're able to reach individuals. They have respect around the world. They have an ability. We could talk to them anytime and work closely together. So there's a lot of different elements to it. It goes way beyond the funding. The funding is critical because it's a match. It's a great incentive for individual Rotarians and for Rotary clubs. And we tell them $1 is $3. And that goes a long way to saying, well, okay, yeah, let me give $1,000 because that's $3,000. That makes a significant difference to our ability to raise funds. So I can't say thank you enough for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They've done a fantastic job with that. But that's one part of the partnership.
As I look at the success of the polio eradication effort, I can't help but think there are lessons to be learned, not only for other global health initiatives, but for other global problems. What are the lessons you've taken away, Bill, from your work in the polio fight?
Well, polio's had to pioneer a lot of things For example, a lot of governments don't know how many kids are living in an area. And if you want to go do a polio campaign and say, okay, did we get a high percentage? You need to know that denominator. And so both of us have been to Nigeria because that was the toughest, other than the two that are left. The north of Nigeria was significantly the most difficult place, and they didn't have those numbers. And so our quality measures really weren't guiding us. Which kids we were missing, we didn't even know how many. And so this idea of mapping out where the kids are, that turned out to be a key tactic. Now, it's not just polio, that all this routine immunization, you'd like to be able to say, okay, let's look in the register, how many kids were signed up there. So polio's had to pioneer a lot of things that will be a legacy to the world of global health. We were also talking about another example that happens to be from Nigeria, is that when you have experts in mapping and supply chains, when a crisis breaks out, like the Ebola crisis, then you can take what we call the Emergency Operations Center and the various disciplines there, and polio can spare some of that capacity to go over and deal with what, in that case, threatened, because of the population of Nigeria, to be 6 times larger than everything that happened in the 3 heavily affected countries. And if polio hadn't been there with those skills and willingness to help out, then the Nigeria Ebola situation, instead of being less than 20 cases, would have been many, many, many thousands. So we're always tracking what are we bringing besides eradicating polio, and making sure we're not distracting, that we're a net addition to the capacity and the funding. In fact, polio is actually funding some things that as that budget is being brought down after eradication, we have to be careful that a few things, we have to find other sources of funding, because a lot of the general vaccination expertise and work, actually, the polio campaign is maintaining a fair bit of that right at the moment.
A few years ago, you wrote about superpowers in your annual letter. What is your superpower?
Well, if I have one, it has something to do with optimism about scientific innovation and being able to gather teams of people, whether it's, we talked about disease modeling, where there's it's a whole deep expertise to help us predict where we're not getting coverage, what we need to do, or people who know about vaccine manufacturing or running big trials. And so my experience at Microsoft was assembling teams of engineers and understanding what was on track, off track, being patient for things that in that case usually took 5 or 6 years. And in the world of medicine, unfortunately, it's like 10 years. The HIV vaccine, between when people started working on it and when we'll finally have one, that will have been almost 25 years. So the patients required the need to have multiple strategies. So it's there in pushing for innovation, seeing the opportunity of innovation, and then directing the resources that I'm lucky enough to have both through Microsoft and that Warren Buffett has made available. Thank goodness it's allowed us to be ambitious, including the scale we're at on polio. And Warren was just in Seattle this week, and I was saying to him, hey, Pakistan, a few setbacks, and he said, but you got to keep going. It's great that you're doing this.
He shares your vision.
Yeah, and he, because he's older, he saw polio in the U.S. I didn't. I was just a kid when it was still. I was born in 1955 when it was really tailing off. There were a few cases out into the 60s.
The year of the Salk vaccine, I think.
Exactly.
55, yeah.
And so he in some ways, it's more visceral that yes, this is a cause that you got to stick with it.
President Barry, what's your superpower?
Our theme in Rotary this year is to be the inspiration. And I'm very fortunate that when I speak with Rotarians, I'm able to give a message that really seems to get them in their hearts, and we're seeing them do more than we've seen before. So inspiring people and getting our Rotary clubs motivated, not only to continue doing the amazing work, they know that's our priority is to eradicate polio, and they keep asking, what's next?
Yeah.
Just let's finish polio. Let's not have a next yet.
Excellent. We are getting the sign that we are out of time, but President Barry, would you take just 30 seconds and tell everyone who's watching how they can contribute to the fight against polio?
Really important. Meet with your Rotary Club, meet with your district. You can do it online. It's about as easy as you possibly can to make any kind of donation. We have recognition that we can give you when you do. It's so easy. And meet a Rotarian anywhere. There's 1.2 million of us around the world, 200 countries. We have 200,000 Rotaractors. Talk to any one of them, they'll tell you how easy it is to donate, because you want to donate because you want to be able to stand up when we said we've certified that polio is gone, that each and every one of us was a part of that.
So people can donate at Rotary.org, right?
Correct, yes they can.
Excellent. Bill, President Barry, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, appreciate the time.
Let's do some good.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very,
Yeah,
very
that
much.
was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, we empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
At goodcrowd.school, 5% of what you pay to learn how to make a difference goes to nonprofits working to eradicate extreme poverty, improve global health, and reverse climate change by 2045. So when you take a course to learn how to change the world, you do change the world. Get started at goodcrowd.school today. Thanks for tuning in to the Your Mark on the World show, the Social Impact Podcast. Please subscribe via YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify.